Welcome to the Town of Grafton Select Board meeting for January the 5th, 2021. Beginning here at 7 p.m. Just as a preliminary matter, my name is Peter Carlson, the chair of Grafton Select Board. Please permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on this agenda are present and can hear me. Select Board members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Mr. Frisbee?
Here.
Ms. Roy?
Roy here.
Mr. Often?
I'm here.
Peter Carlson is here, and Mr. Fazio will not be here this evening. For staff that is here, when I please call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Temporary Town Administrator Carter Terenzini.
Present.
And William Blake, who will be joining us later in the agenda. Carter, you'll be bringing William on or letting him know when we get close. Thank you. If applicable, anticipated speakers on the agenda tonight, please respond in the affirmative. Tonight, we have Bill August, Special Counsel of the Town of Grafton.
Affirmative.
Cable TV Oversight Committee member, Mr. Bob DeToma. Mr. Bob Berger.
Bob Berger is present.
Mr. Jim Gallagher.
Jim Gallagher is present.
Thank you. Okay, and then tonight, anticipated speakers, we have Steve Belfiore. Not here yet. And Mr. Sean Briggs.
Present.
Thank you. And then Miss Mary Laurie, who will be brought in during the affirmation part of our meeting. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this open meeting of the Town of Grafton Select Board, and is being conducted remotely consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020. Due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth, due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus, in order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted to the town's website at www.grafton-ma.gov, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely as long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment for a public hearing that is scheduled tonight. For this meeting, the Select Board is convened via Zoom, as posted as the town's website identifying how the public may join. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that people may be able to see you and that take care not to screen share your computer. Anything you broadcast may be captured by the recording and viewed to the public. All supporting materials have been provided to members of this body are available on the town's website when final minutes are posted. Unless otherwise noted, the public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I, the chair, will note otherwise. Now, before we get to the first item of the agenda, but before we do so, please let me just cover some ground rules just so we can run this meeting effectively during Zoom. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda tonight. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the list of select board members, inviting each of you to participate and provide any comments, questions, or motions. Please hold your name until your name is called. Please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly in a way that helps to generate accurate minutes. Finally, just so you know that each vote tonight will be conducted by roll call vote. And for items tonight, which include public comment, for members of the public who wish to speak about the cable franchise agreement, which will be starting here shortly, can do so by using the raise hand feature within Zoom. And I will promote you as a panelist and have you wait until we finish our remarks, and we'll go through the list of the public who may ask its question or make its comments. All right, without further ado, we just got some announcements to read. Just to remind everyone that the Municipal Center remains closed to the general public due to the town's designation as a red or high-risk community. Shortly after the red designation is lifted, the Municipal Center will return to appointment scheduling. Customer business services can and will be done remotely during this time. As of December 31st, 2020, the Grafton Strong account has a total has had $6,746.66 paid out to assist residents who have been impacted by COVID-19 and find themselves in need of financial assistance. A balance of $1,883.23 remains in the account. Information about the account, whether to donate or apply for assistance, can be found on the town's website at www.grafton-ma.gov. Just a reminder that the recycling center located at 27 Upton Street is open on Saturdays only from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. for all Grafton residents. Residents can bring basic household recycling such as paper, cardboard, glass, and plastic. Please note that fluorescent bulbs are not being accepted at this time. Collection of fluorescent bulbs will resume in the spring. Please note that individuals visiting the recycling center must wear a mask and practice social distancing. Just a reminder to all committee members standing and elected that annual town reports are due January 29, 2021. If you have any questions about the report, please contact the town administrator's office. Grafton Recreation has launched a winter program including an esports league, free fun Fridays, outdoor adventure days, snowshoe hikes, and an explore the outdoor activities guide and more. You may find further information and registration at www.graftonrec.com. In addition, lastly, just a reminder, although the library remains closed to the public, the programs to go online programming, remote reference service, and no contact curbside service will continue in the new year. Please call ahead at 508-839-4649 to place a request for the library materials or place a hold online through your library account at grafton.cwmars.org. And that's it. Do we have any members from the public that need to make a comment that's not anticipated on the agenda tonight? No? Okay, so we're going to move into the first scheduled item tonight, which is a public hearing about cable license renewal. Ms. Marr, if you would please make a motion to open the public hearing, please.
Do you want me to make a motion or do you want me to read the notice
Sorry,
first?
read the notice first. I'm sorry, the way you word. Thank you.
Okay. The town of Grafton by the select board as the statutory cable license issuing authority will hold a cable license renewal public hearing on the 5th day of January 2021 at 7 p.m. pertaining to the Spectrum Northeast LLC in connection with the possible issuance of a cable television renewal license to Spectrum. Please note, due to COVID-19 state of emergency, the public hearing will be virtual and can be attended by desktop, laptop, tablet, or phone via Zoom. The Zoom link and remote access information will be provided on the January 5th, 2021 Grafton Select Board meeting agenda. The agenda shall be viewable in advance on the town website and at the office of the Select Board. The hearing shall be televised live on Charter Channel 192 and Verizon Channel 33. If the state of emergency is terminated or if the governor's order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law is rescinded, this public hearing will be held in the Select Board meeting room on the first floor of the Grafton Memorial Municipal Center, 30 Providence Road, Grafton, at the date and time specified above. Please call the Select Board office at 508-839-5335, extension 1180 for more information. This proceeding is held pursuant to the federal law 47 USC 546 to ascertain Grafton's cable-related needs as part of the license renewal process, and possible final action to approve the license may be considered and taken by the issuing authority. Public comment on local cable needs and past performances of Spectrum, formerly known as Charter, is invited and shall be allowed by electronic video and audio conference platforms as set forth above. Copies of the town license renewal document may be made available for public inspection at the office of the town clerk by contacting BOS Group at grafton-ma.gov or calling 508-839-5335 extension 1180 to set up an appointment. By order of the Select Board as statutory license issuing authority, I believe that's it. The rest looks like it was for a newspaper. So I move the board vote to open the public hearing pertaining to Spectrum Northeast LLC in connection with the possible issuance of cable television renewal license to Spectrum.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to open the public hearing. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those by roll call, please. Ms. Roy?
Roy, aye.
Mr. Often?
Upton, aye.
Mr. Prisby?
Frisbee, aye.
Peter Carlson, I declare the motion carried. Open the public hearing. I just have a brief draft opening statement that I would like to read, please, and then we'll go into just a brief overview and discussion from Cable Oversight Committee and Mr. Bill August. Good evening and welcome to the Town of Grafton's public hearing on Charter's cable license renewal. My name is Peter Carlson. I'm the chair of the Select Board, which is the cable license issue authority under Mass General Law, Chapter 166A. With me tonight are the Select Board members of the Grafton Cable and the Cable's Oversight Committee, including its chair, Jim Gallagher, members Bob Berger, Mr. DeToma, and that's all who's here tonight. as well as the town's cable counsel, Bill August. We are grateful to the advisory committee for their diligent work to assist the town. Notice of this hearing was in the local newspapers 2 successive weeks. Copies of the legal advertisement are here entered into the record as ascertainment hearing exhibits 1 and 2. By way of background for the public, state law requires the holding of a public hearing prior to the final action of the proposed renewal license, which shall include opportunity for public comment on town needs, charter performance, and proposed renewal license. Based on information before us this evening and based on the prior public testimony and a prior public hearing, including the advisory committee's recommendation of approval, the select board may take final action on the renewal process before this evening. Any public comment as well as questions to the charter should be directed through me as chair, and I will rule whether they are in order. Please keep your comments no longer than a few minutes. Before hearing from the public, let's first introduce the Cable Advisory Committee members. Here tonight with us, we have Special Town Counsel Bill August for some brief comments, and then we will accept comments from the board and the public, if any. For members, before we get into Mr. August, for members who would like to speak with regards to this public hearing, may do so by raising your hand, and I will start bringing you in as panelists for this, and I will bring to your attention when you have the floor. Thank you. Mr. August, if you would like to go.
Thank you. Good evening. Happy New Year, all. It's great to be back working again closely with the Cable Oversight Committee. For those I have not worked with previously as members of the Board of Selectmen, I've represented Grafton. Peter, how far? It probably goes back 15 years and at least 3 cable licenses going back to Greater Media before there was a charter, then the first Verizon, and now again. So it's a play, and this town has always been a leader in your region in terms of negotiating comprehensive licenses, and amongst the strongest licenses in your whole part of the state in terms of having a strong complement of local public educational and governmental access channels and maximum funding. So it's been a learning experience. I have, a long background in cable, but I know working with Grafton and we always push the envelope. So I always feel good about it. It's a great process. In terms of the summary, sorry for the long-winded nostalgia. In terms of the summary for where we are right now, I have an outline of some of the highlights, which could be good informational background as we are trying. The committee has recommended approval of this package because it's a great package and we're happy about it, and it met our goals and objectives. And my outline of highlights are the annual funding for the community studio operational budget will be at 5% of charter's gross annual revenues. That's the maximum permitted under the Federal Cable Act, 5% cap. That's the same as Verizon is paying. And it's, so that it's strong. That's where the lion's share of the financial package is in terms of the annual franchise fee. Some towns, but very few charter towns in recent years have negotiated equipment capital grants above and beyond the federal permitted 5% cap for annual operational funding. And Grafton is one of those towns. Grafton has, in this license before you, in section 5, by the way, the 5% annual, if anyone is taking notes and wants to go back, that's in renewal license section 5.4.1. Above and beyond that, as I said, very few towns get capital grants these days above the 5%. Grafton did, and it has 2 revenue streams for equipment funding above and beyond the 5% max. And those are in 5.3.1. And they consist of 0.5%, 0.5% of gross annual revenues payable quarterly for capital and equipment and facilities, not just equipment, the facility. This all counts as capital. Capital is excluded under the Cable Act from the 5% cap. You can get 5% for operational, but that cap does not apply to capital. So we got some, in addition to the 0.5% for gross annual revenues for capital, we have an annual $6,000 a year for equipment. So it's those two streams together. And those are basically proportional to what Verizon is doing. We were trying to match the Verizon package, which is also a good one. The license is non-exclusive. You know, a lot of times voters and constituents say, why is there only one or two cable companies? Your town must have given away the store and given them some exclusivity. No, this is completely non-exclusive by its terms in very explicit language. There's a good commitment to local video origination. You may recall Bob Burgers and Jim Gallagher and Bob DeToma are the experts on this. They worked out a relocation of the studio to the municipal building across from Town Hall. I believe it's 30 Providence Road. Unless that's the municipal office address, but you know what, right across from Town Hall, where that adds a lot of value to the municipal telecommunications capability, because now they're right across the parking area. And Bob Burger and Jim Gallagher and Bob DeToma put in a lot of hours as volunteer, you know, moving that along with both Charter and Verizon about a year and a half ago. And it was done informally. And we now have that codified as a Charter commitment to be continued for 10 years to maintain and operate that interconnection. So that also adds value. The local PEG access channels continue at the status quo, which is the three standard PEG access channels for PE and G purposes, public educational governmental access purposes. There is an option that the town can exercise to get a fourth channel delivered in high definition for PEG access, but Charter has nowhere agreed to make a fourth channel available at its own cost. The other channels it makes available at its own cost currently. But the town wanted a fourth to deploy the new high definition technology. But we pushed them further than other towns because we got an option to get it, but we would have to use our annual funding to pay for it. So it's an option. It's you know, it's a transactional thing, but at least we have the option. There's no great need to exercise that option, nor could we without entering a separate negotiation to get a cost estimate from them. But at least we have that option, which we didn't have before. The term of the license is for 10 years, which is good these days because of the changing marketplace. A lot of the companies are trying to bail out of cable and switch to wireless models. So we wanted to lock them in for a decent period of time, and so you don't have to go through the hassle of doing a renewal in a few more years. So we did get a 10-year commitment, and that's longer than the Verizon commitment. And then those are the main components that took up a lot of time, you know, the financial and the local interconnection. There are, you know, I also include in my summary, we have very comprehensive customer service standards. The FCC has a set of very strong customer service guidelines about timetables for responding to outages and answering phone calls and a whole slew of guidelines. But those are all voluntary as set forth by the FCC. But we had Charter agree to incorporate them as mandatory standards, not voluntary guidelines. So they're incorporated in our license in Section 7 and in one of the license exhibits. Service to municipal buildings continues. There has been a change in law on this issue of service to municipal buildings. The FCC in late 2018 issued a new rulemaking and an order on the rulemaking that any mandated service that used to be complimentary has a value and it has to be counted towards your 5% statutory franchise fee cap. Charter had already begun charging the town for service to municipal buildings based on their interpretation that that counts towards the 5%. So it's a small dent in the 5%. You know, the charge for basic service is under $50 a location per month, probably a lot less. But I do want to just disclose that because for many people involved in cable licensing, they're so accustomed to getting the service to the schools and the municipal buildings for free. And Charter had begun charging for that based on an interpretation of the 5% cap. And the FCC actually issued a ruling agreeing with the Charter and Verizon approach that that's a chargeable franchise fee. So the service area is, you know, we grandfathered the existing service area and the town is built out. So we don't have really service area issues. All they would do on service area is match what Verizon did, which is to grandfather their existing footprint, which is the whole town. But if there are new unbuilt areas, they only have to do the new residences at standard installation charges if the residences are within 150 feet of the cable system plant. I'm almost done. I only have a few more points. And that's what Verizon committed to. And we have a level playing field clause in each license where we really can't crank them up to have to do more than Verizon. So we just sought equivalency with Verizon there. The license, of course, provides very strong insurance requirements, very strong like $4 million general liability, and then umbrella coverage, and then the whole, you know, alphabet soup of other kinds of insurance requirements, which is like the boilerplate from workers' comp to automobile. We have that all covered. That's very important. We have very strong indemnification language where the company has to indemnify the town for any legal expenses or liabilities arising in connection with their operation of their cable system. And we also have very, as strong as possible language that, you know, above and beyond the performance bond, the insurance, and the indemnification, the town reserves any and all legal remedies at law and equity. So there's nothing, there's also language, which is one reason municipal lawyers love the Cable Act, that says that the town has no monetary liabilities. If the town were to do something that Charter thought was in material breach of the license, all Charter could do is seek injunctive relief to get an order to get the town to be in compliance, but it could not seek monetary damages. And that's like gives you some good breathing room. And a lot of municipalities are unaware that licenses have that language frequently. We have that language about no monetary liability for the town. The only other 2 points I'll make, somewhat legalistic. I alluded to the FCC 2018 order. It's called the 621 order. It's, you know, it broadens the degree to which cable companies can, because cable companies are subject to a cap on annual franchise fees, they can now look around for other things that might count towards that 5% franchise fee. The only thing Charter has given us notice of that they want to count is the mandatory service to schools and municipal buildings. But there is some risk factor there, and there are about 30 municipalities suing the FCC right now. It's pending in federal court, saying it was not the intent of the Cable Act to count other stuff towards the 5%. So that's out there, and I just mentioned that in the spirit of full disclosure. because nobody knows where that will go or not go. Hopefully, it will be very minimal impact. According to the cable companies, it will be minimal impact. But there are some unknowns there, and we've discussed that at length internally with the committee. And while I mentioned the committee, in addition to mentioning their unbelievable, it was very skillful work, not just hard work, on the studio interconnection, because Bob Berger was very diplomatic in getting a very good deal from both Verizon and Charter on that. But I just want to mention my gratitude to them, because like over the course of negotiating like 60-page licenses here, you know, there are always like 101 things. Every other week, I have to call Bob DeToma or Bob Berger and say, where is this in the system and what does that do? And these guys like just are always helpful and responsive and care a lot. So I just want to get my thank yous out there. And same to Peter Carlson. We hit a snag on the license negotiations. I was worried that we had alienated Charter. It turned out, Peter, Chairman Carlson, they were just slowed down because of their own internal problems. But Peter helped put the pressure on to reactivate the process, which had slowed down. So everyone's been helpful. The only other legal changes, you may have heard that Charter had petitioned the FCC to confirm that rates are deregulated. Not that rate regulation is rate regulation was pretty meaningless to begin with. The state regulated some basic rates, but higher tiers were deregulated, so it didn't really matter. But the Charter petitioned the FCC to get all the rates deregulated. This has nothing to do with the license, but just a week and a half ago, a federal court upheld the FCC in granting deregulation. They're allowed to deregulate rates where there's, quote, effective competition. And Charter had petitioned the FCC saying there was effective competition. So some of my towns, people ask about that because they had heard about that. That's another new development. And then my final legalistic comment is just that, you know, all these licenses have level playing field clauses. Verizon insists on one and Charter insists on one. So that if the town issues any kind of license or permits or cable licenses, they have to check with the oversight committee to see if that could trigger the level playing field clause, which is too much of an issue to get into tonight, other than to note we have a good level playing field clause, a very good one. It's great. It's a great clause. But I'd bore you to death but there is one. So when if a new company comes along, even if it's not a cable company, certain things can be triggered by town permits and authorizations to other companies that could cause realignments within the cable license. It's just a few things. Only another cable company can trigger meaningful modifications. But even so if there's any permits to a telecommunications company or a cable company, be aware that you have to check in with the oversight committee, and they can give me a call and see if it triggers anything. I just want to mention that because that's a moving target. That's based on things that happen in the future, in terms of future licenses, and there's no license in Massachusetts without some type of procedure for that, which would include a hearing, so I have to mention that. Bottom line is, I feel very good about it. You know, it's like a maximum continuity of these local channels. And I'll close on saying that with the pandemic and this COVID-19 nightmare, you know, it really shines a light on, look at us tonight. We're dependent on telecommunications to be together and to be connected. And the cable companies are very proud of that, actually, and are aware of their role in this COVID-19. The municipal telecommunications people are very aware of it. It gives us a little more leverage because when we take issues to the cable companies and the telecom providers, we now have a recognition that this is critical infrastructure. So it's important stuff. and I'm happy with it. And the committee recommended it unanimously at a meeting, at our last meeting. So I think we're in pretty good shape.
Thank you, Mr. August. I appreciate that. So any members of the select board have any questions or comments they wanted before we turn this over to the public, or any members who are negotiating with Mr. Gallagher, you or Mr. Berger, have any comments that you'd like to make? Mr. Gallagher.
Thank you. I just want to, I'm not paid by the hour, so I'll be short. I just wanted to make it crystal clear, the work that was done by Bob DeToma, by the commissioner, Bob Berger, and by Bill August, along with the job that was done by Peter, was just immense. The board had issues that we had discussed and wanted to make sure that we were protected upon, and all of those were addressed. All of those are in the contract. And one of the things that Bill mentioned, but I just want to emphasize, is that there in our area, there are no other towns that are that have a better contract than what you three folks have negotiated. You four folks, excuse me, have negotiated. So the board, as Bill said, was unanimous in its support. And as chair, I really need to point out the work that was done by Bob DeToma, by Bob Berger, by Bill August, and by Peter Carlson was tremendous. It was a wonderful service to the town, and we got the best deal that's out there. So I'll leave it at that.
Mr. Berger, do you have any comments?
No, I just think it's a great contract, and I hope the board, adopts this.
Thank you.
And Bill, it was great working with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Berger. Before I turn over to the select board, if any members of the public would wish to come in and speak during this public hearing about this license, please do so by using the raise hand function within the Zoom function, and I will promote you as a panelist. Any of the select board members have any comments or questions? I just want to point out too that these are extremely exhausting activities, cable franchise license agreement. And I just want to, again, I don't want to belabor this, but thank you very much for due diligence, the patience. Even on the fact of charter, I know that they were going through some, challenges with COVID-19. I just want to say on behalf of the town, I think, we are very appreciative of both our cable providers providing the level of service to the residents and giving residents in Grafton a choice over its TV provider. I would have to agree with everything that members have said tonight about, I think we have one of the best studios in the state, I think, or in the region, I would say, and about how this was structured going back to the 1980s, before my time. But again, I want to thank everybody and thank you for your attention tonight and listening to what this agreement brings for the town of Grafton. Any members from the public, last call before I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I'd like to say one thing. A note of thank you also was owed to John Marr from Charter Spectrum, because at times he was just taking it back to corporate and he didn't show his cards. And that went on for a long time. But the whole time he was listening, and at the end he came back, showing that he totally got it and understood it and cared. And so John Marr at Charter really met us halfway. That was good.
Thank you for that reminder. All right, if there's not any members from the public that would like to come in and speak to this, any members of the select board, if there's any further comments, I can entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I move the board vote to close the public hearing pertaining to Spectrum Northeast LLC in connection with the possible issuance of a cable television renewal license to Spectrum.
Second.
Motion made and second to close the public hearing. Any discussion on the motion to close?
Yeah,
Yes.
just wanted to say, I appreciate the contract. I think it's a great one. Just for the public's benefit, these funds provide the basis for a lot of the important technology that we use in Grafton. So it's not just the cable studio. It's a lot of other things, a lot of the build out of, the audio visual equipment in the municipal center, our wide area network that connects all the important buildings in town. This serves as the foundation for all of that technology. So I can't say enough about, the work that you guys have done. I really do appreciate it. I'm really pleased to see that we had a capital component in there as well. So thanks for that.
Thank you, Mr. Hoffman. Any further discussion on closing the public hearing? Seeing none, all those by roll call, please. Mr. Hoffman,
Often I.
Mr. Frisbee,
Frisbee, aye.
Ms. Roy,
Roy, I.
Peter Carlson, I declare the motion carried, closing the public hearing. At this time before us, we have license in front of us. If there aren't any questions or comments, I can entertain a motion from the board.
I move the board vote to approve the issuance of the cable television renewal license to Spectrum.
Motion made and seconded to renew the license. Any discussion on the motion? One last thing, I think it's important to know for the public to see this, that this agreement is what supports the public educational government channels in Grafton Studios. That public component is free for anybody in Grafton to use. You can go down there, you can get free training. He'll teach you how to do editing, how to do video shooting, how to do directing, and how to do publishing. It's a great thing to have. I did it years ago, and it's one of the few things where I think government really does very well for the public in returning this asset. Thank you. Any discussion on approving the license? Seeing none. All those by roll call, please. Mr. Hoffman,
Often I.
Mr. Frisbee,
Frisbee, aye.
Ms. Roy,
Roy, I.
Peter Carlson, I declare the motion carried 4-0. Thank you very much. Mr. August, thank you very much for coming in tonight. Thank you, Mr. Berger. Thank you, Mr. Gallagher. And thank you, Mr. Toma, and the other members of the committee for their due diligence and hard work on this. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Take
Thank
care,
you.
everyone.
Good to see
Happy
you all
New
work.
Year. Thank you. Good to see you. Bye.
All right. All right. Thank you very much. All right. So next up on our agenda tonight, we have an action item in front of us to vote to transfer Townhouse Garden Fund monies to the Grafton Food Bank. If you recall, this was an action brought from us from Mr. Yeomans, who was the sole person who was maintaining the Townhouse Garden, who set up a public fund for this. They're looking to donate the residual of these funds to the Grafton Food Bank. And Mr. Yeomans, I think, Ms. Roy, you have a letter from him, or tonight, if we needed to read it into the record, that it was all unanimous from all of the donors to donate the money.
Good morning and Happy New Year's wishes to all of you. The results are in unanimous approval by the Garden Fund donors as suggested by the board at your meeting on December 15, 2020. 32 of 37 donors to the Grafton Townhouse Garden Fund were contacted by me and have voted unanimously to approve the transfer of the remaining balance in the Grafton Townhouse Garden Fund special gift account to the Grafton Food Bank. I respectfully ask that you approve this request, which will enable the Grafton Food Bank to quickly receive these sorely needed funds to provide assistance to the Grafton individuals and families dealing with the ongoing food insecurities. With thanks, Bill Yeomans.
Thank you. Does any board have any questions tonight about this transfer to the Grafton Food Bank? Okay, seeing none, I can entertain a motion.
I move the board vote to approve the transfer of the remaining monies in the Grafton Townhouse Garden Fund special gift account to the Grafton Food Bank.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to transfer funds to the Grafton Food Bank from the Townhouse Garden Fund. Any discussion on that motion? Before we take a vote, I just want to thank the people who donated to the Townhouse Garden Fund for their extreme generosity and their willingness to donate their residual funds to Grafton Food Bank. I know it's sorely needed in Grafton. It's going to go to a lot of needy people who will benefit from these funds. Personally, I just want to thank them on behalf of the board and the town. Any other discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those by roll call, please. Mr. Often,
Often I.
Mr. Frisbee,
Frisbee, aye.
Ms. Roy,
Roy, I.
Peter Carlson, I declare the motion carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Yeomans, for doing the due diligence. We appreciate it. So next up tonight is Mr. Steve Belfiore here from the Grafton Grill. We have an action item regarding a music license application. Good evening, Ms. Belfiore. Mr. Belfiore, how are you?
Good, how are you? Thanks.
Very good, thank you. So tonight we have for our review and approval a license for live music. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Mr. Hoffman.
Yeah, I guess I just have a couple questions. First, how did we get in a place where, live music was being performed without a license? And I guess second, this board had some concerns that were expressed last week about the kind of public health impact of live entertainment during COVID. And I guess I'd just like your assurances that you're kind of well read on the state's guidance with regard to that. And, we have your strong commitment to follow that guidance.
Is that directed towards me, Matt?
Yes, Mr. Belfiore.
Okay, yeah.
Please.
Yeah, so as far as the license goes, I'll be honest with you. This goes back to when we first opened. And I don't know if Bob Berger's still on, but originally we had said, we might do some music during brunch and stuff like that. We weren't allowed to get a license because we had to do something with our fire alarm and the lights and tie it in so that if an amplifier caught on fire, the whole system and the lights would come up. And that's what Bob told us. So we said, well, how can you get around that? And he said, if it's a battery powered amplifier, you could have live music. And that was 4 years ago. Since then, and I'll be honest with you, and you guys know, we've had live music on Sunday brunch. We have one person playing. We haven't had it. We don't do it every brunch, but we've had music over the last 4 years and no one has ever said anything. So we just didn't know. And I apologize for not, asking and bringing it up. We just didn't ever get asked and we never were approached and we just never thought we ever needed it. When the pandemic hit, we talked to Nancy and we just were on the assumption that as long as it was outside, because we didn't really do anything and it was an amplifier, we could continue it as long as it wasn't under the tent, which it wasn't. We never had music under the tent. And the one time that we did, it was raining and the tent sides were open still because it was in the summer. So we were never in an enclosed area. But we've always had our music outside the tent and we've always followed guidelines. And nobody's ever said anything to us about our music. We've never had more than 2 people playing at a time. So, but as far as the license goes, I don't know. I mean, I don't know where the breakdown was. There's been many board members since then in the last 4 years, and we just never really, ever really needed it. And we're not a music venue place. We don't really need the music. Reason why we're doing it now is because we felt like if we have to go outside again this summer, the music part of it was a good thing. And a lot of our customers enjoyed it. So we are asking to get the license for that. Will we do music inside? Probably not, because we really aren't a music place. So we're just asking for the license to get so that when we do go outside this summer, we'll have it and we won't have any issues.
Thank you, Mr. Belfiore. Anyone have any questions or comments for Mr. Belfiore? Ms. Roy?
So I don't know if it's necessarily for Mr. Belfiore or for more for the board, but when I was looking at that application, I don't understand where they get the description to limit the actual license. Like on the other licenses that I've seen, it tells you the description of where music will be allowed. I don't see that on the application. So where does who applies that? Is that something that the town does or what? And how do we make it so that we could include outdoor entertainment for anybody who might want it when they're applying?
So Mr. Terenzini, this is where on the license or where it says description of premise of where live music will be conducted. So that's a good question. Like that's nowhere on the application per se, except just the address. So I don't know if that can be answered tonight, but that's something I know probably an ongoing bigger discussion regarding our license discussions from last week.
Yes, we would encourage the board to go about establishing a new application, which is perhaps similar to the alcohol applications, actually included a sketch of the areas that would be used. I think that if it's to be used on the exterior of the premises, but tonight that could be done by condition of the board.
Thank you. Mr. Hoffman?
Thanks. Yeah. So I did a fair amount of research on licenses in other towns. I think we should take this up as a separate item and redo all of the licenses because I wouldn't necessarily be in favor of doing anything different for any given business. we've been operating under these licenses for years. So I'd be more in favor of just aligning their license with everybody else's and then redoing all of them kind of all at the same time, because I do think they all need to be redone.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Yeah, so I wanted to say, I want to echo what Mr. Often is mentioning tonight. Mr. Belfiore, as you're aware, as we were examining these music licenses and the way that they're described, there are some, let's just say that there are some descriptions of, when and where these activities will be conducted. And I think the board was in total agreement that it really was wanting to encourage outdoor, but have the license specify that so there's no ambiguity going forward. If the board wishes tonight to just approve this license as is, it's going to talk about the description of premise, but please note that this board is eager before weather gets nice enough for outdoor dining to accommodate outdoor live music specifically for these types of venues. So I guess to Mr. Often's point, if the board wishes, we can approve this tonight, just knowing that we're going to be making some minor changes to the licenses, including the description of the premise to include outdoor in an area, to what Mr. Terenzini perhaps may have said as a suggestion, and in addition to specifying the days and times, because as we see that the form license that gets put out today, it only talks about music, can be conducted on weekdays between the hours of noon and 1 a.m. and Friday till 2 a.m. So, I know that's not conducive, as weekend, traffic is usually the highest for restaurants. So we do want to come back and fix that. And that would be for all holders of a music license for the town of Grafton. Do you have any questions on that, Mr. Belfiore, before we move forward?
No, so again, the reason why we're asking, obviously, we don't want to have any trouble or any issues with us being non-compliance. But so will you be able to bring this license outside, let's say April 1st, if we're outside with tents, or will you not?
I think we can do it. I have to still get the town to take a look at this and provide options to the board. I'm thinking that we can start taking this up in the February timeframe, and then make a final decision early March, then everyone's well aware before that April 1st, time when, weather starts getting nicer. Does that work for you?
Yeah. No, like I said, we did have some, music at brunch, and we would love to continue that. Once we get back to normal, we're not doing brunch again right now. It's just the business isn't there, but we will put it back on. And if we are inside or outside, but inside preferably, we would love to have the license so that we could do that and entertain our customers.
Yeah.
So
I would agree.
that's why we want the license, but we're just not gonna, we're not gonna have a band in there and rock bands and stuff. It's just not the type of place.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the board, Mr. Frisbee?
Yeah, I just want to be clear about, what we're doing here when we talk about this. The only reason we really care whether or not someone would have music on the premises is, number one, whether there's a noise impact to neighbors, and you have a business that's near a residential district, and whether or not there are COVID guidelines that are being complied with. If this were 2 years ago, we're not talking about music outdoors, but it's not 2 years ago, it's this year. So really, we really don't care, but for those things, if you want to have music indoors, and fantastic, happy to come listen to some. But if it's going to be during COVID, that's another discussion. And if it's going to be outdoors with a tent during COVID, that's another discussion. So that's really the only reason why we're talking about these things. It's the only thing that's different now than there was last year.
Any further discussion or comments before we entertain a motion? Okay, there's an I'll entertain a motion.
I move the board vote to accept the 2021 music license for the Grafton Grill LLC.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to grant the license? Seeing none, all those by roll call, please. Mr. Often,
Often aye.
Mr. Frisbee,
Frisbee, aye.
Roy,
Roy, aye.
Peter Carlson, aye. Declare the motion carried 4-0. Thank you, Mr. Belfiore, for coming in. I know the town may be in contact with you with regards to input on these moving forward. Again, our intention is to get these remedied and get them in a good working order for everyone to know, what's expected going forward.
Understood. Thanks.
Thank you
Appreciate it.
very much. Yep.
No, thank you. Thanks, guys.
All right, next up here, we have action item. This is continuance from last Tuesday's meeting with regards to Union Tap and Table music license renewal. We had a lengthy discussion. Mr. Briggs was kind enough to join us here again tonight for this, if there were any other questions or comments that need to be made. But before we get into that, I just want to give Mr. Briggs a few moments if he would like to share some remarks to the board, and then we can take up the conversation amongst ourselves.
Thank you, Peter. So, we take this very seriously, and I think there's been some thought that maybe we're being smug about this, and honestly, we're not. We take the health and safety of our staff and our customers very seriously. The amount of time and energy and money we've spent over COVID to keep people safe with takeout containers and plexiglass, a separate tent for the customers from the area where the bands were playing. We have every intention of trying to follow what the rules are. I think we've had some issues with clarity in what those rules are. I think they're more clear now. We have no intention of violating the mandate that's in place. We have no intention of indoor music. We probably won't have indoor music even when it's allowed at first, because we prefer it to be outside because that works so well. We also all realize at this point that we're dealing with a license that actually doesn't even deal with outside. So everybody in town that had musicians all summer long, we were all outside of the license. And we're more than willing to communicate more often about what we're doing before we have any artists back or do anything in that manner. We'd be more than happy to check with the Board of Health, make a phone call before it happens and get their approval and discuss the area where the band is playing, and they can come down and check it out. We didn't feel we had that support before. We were just getting bombarded with emails by the way, I still don't have the documents. I guess they're in the mail today, so I'll see them soon. But there's straightforward channels, and we just want to keep those communications open. If the Alliance want to come down and talk about it, we'd be happy to do that. They can come down while the bands are playing, whenever. We're all for it. We want to keep the communication open. We're not trying to get people sick. We're not trying to break rules. It was not a financial windfall for us. It definitely helped, but it didn't give us a record year of income or anything like that. So, we've been good town members, and we will continue to be. I've got family that lives in town, my brother, my parents. We've been in town since the 80s. We now have 2 businesses in town. We're not looking to cause trouble. We never have been. So, we hope you take that into consideration. And I would love to see the other restaurants in town and ours get together with you guys and come up with some times and noise ordinances and all that stuff, so we can play nice and be within the rules, and do this so the town is happy, and we are as well. So that's really all I have to say. I thank you for your consideration, and we understand this isn't even going to be probably an issue till March or April, so there's some time to hash this stuff out. So it's whatever you guys want to do at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Briggs, for coming in tonight. Appreciate that. Does any of the board members have any comments or direction that we want to go with regards to their music license tonight? Mr. Austin.
So like I said, I did a fair amount of research into licenses that other towns had granted. I was trying to take on board our general counsel's commentary around what our options are. And we had discussed at the end of our meeting, potentially looking at imposing some conditions and granting the license. So I looked into that. And I guess I just wanted to share some information. Most of the limitations or conditions that I saw put on licenses, and by the way, there were very few other towns that had licenses that looked like Grafton's. I think Hanover was the only other town that had the weird muscle dancing and jingle boards. And I don't know where that came from, but most other towns have gotten away from that at this point. So I think our licenses are definitely in need of revamping. So I do look forward to that process. Some of those conditions, though, that were pretty common were the days of the week. Some towns had special Sunday licenses. The times of performance, the number of performers was pretty common. Amplification of music was a concern that came up within a number of towns. Some towns limited to indoors performance only. Um, like, so some of the things that we could consider if we were to think about conditions might be, again, the primary concern for us is public health. We could limit the number of performers potentially. That might be something that would help in terms of public health. We could contemplate, if there were more than one performer, we could require the performers to wear masks. We could think about requiring a distance between performers and patrons. We could think about restricting the types of instruments. For example, the state specifically points out wind instruments as a potential, way to spread COVID. So those are all things that we could consider that I think would fall into the types of conditions that I saw in other licenses that were granted. There were things like requiring managers to control the volume, for example. And there was very specific things around directing as a condition of the license, any contracts with performers would have to include clauses that said essentially if they had violations of noise ordinance or number of performers or whatever, that they would be dismissed without pay, sorts of things. So there was some fairly directive things in there that we could think about. So all of that is to say that that's sort of the research that I did. Those are some of the options that I would think about putting forth. For me, I have some concerns with using that type of approach. These restrictions are obviously all COVID related that we would be contemplating tonight. This is an annual license. And so I'm wondering just around the timing, what happens after COVID? So if all those restrictions open up, we're still going to be requiring them to have masks and social distancing and these other things when those restrictions get lifted by the state. So I have some concerns about that. Second, these restrictions were already in place per the state guidance. So I don't know necessarily that if we were to impose these conditions, that we'd be doing anything different than existed already. So I have some concerns about that. And our primary concern really is about public health. So, enforcement of public health issues at restaurants clearly falls right into the Board of Health. Everything that I read in those emails that we were sent from the Board of Health, the Health Alliance, and the state indicated to me that they have a very prescriptive, documented process for enforcement that was being followed at all the different levels. The one exception to that, I think, has to do with a conflict of interest on our Board of Health. And so, again, something that we could contemplate would be to ask Mr. Briggs to step down from the Board of Health as a way to resolve that conflict within the Board of Health, to allow them to do their enforcement job, to allow the business to have their entertainment license along with all the other businesses with, just that one restriction, which really would have no material impact on how they were providing that entertainment. So I guess I would encourage the board to think about that as a condition. So that's what I have for right now.
Any other questions or comments from the board? So I do have a couple of concerns. Mr. Hoffman, I'm going to kind of walk backwards there. That last one about, another member on another board that governs, that's part of public health here for Grafton. I don't know if I feel comfortable making a music license condition on someone's status. That's just my personal feeling on that. I'm not personally in favor of any type of conditions for that. Whereas, setting conditions for, the use of personal protection equipment while in the workplace, I think that's pretty well defined today, to your point. I think those rules exist, the state has handed down, and, everyone, should be adhering to those. And I would consider musicians, playing at a restaurant, somebody in the workplace. I'm thinking, how do we go forward with making changes? I would think that if we're going to have a condition on one license, that we really examine and should those conditions, whatever they may be applicable to all the licenses, people who hold music licenses. And I'm more along the lines of looking for equity, as well as, all organizations that seek these types of licensures can have some consistency. So I'd be interested to see, how that would play out as well. So I think that's, just my comments back to you. I do agree that we really need to revamp these in their entirety. I think there are some things that we can do temporarily for April 1st. And then I think the longer term thing would be to revamp these in entirety. Because like I said, as I read in accordance with the provisions of Chapter 299 in the Acts of 1926, I think someone saying the Acts of 1926 should be, enough. That was almost 100 years ago. I think it's long overdue for a comprehensive review. But I would be in favor of that, obviously, at a future date. That's how I feel. Does any other member board have any comments before we take action? Mr. Prisby and then Ms. Roy.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about revamping these at a later date, but really that's not before us. What's before us is this particular license. And I appreciate Matt's train of thought, and it was a train that I was following as well. But I think the problem with micromanaging COVID regulations, the number of musicians, the distance between them, those are all things that the COVID guidelines are supposed to address. So I think my preference would be to keep it simple if we're going with conditions, which I think are warranted here. I don't particularly care who does or doesn't have other conditions, because this is sort of a special case where there just have been so many, there's just such a document trail with the Board of Health in the state. So I think my line of thinking is just the condition ought to be compliance with all state recommended COVID guidelines, and leave it to the enforcement of phase 1, step 1, phase 2, step 2, phase 3, step 1. And when we start getting wind again, or if we start getting wind again that there are failures, then we have made it abundantly clear within the message of the license that this is what we're looking at. And we don't get into, well, is it a state law? Is it a state recommendation? Is it a state guideline? Doesn't matter. I don't want to play that game later on. I do appreciate what Sean has said about, owning a business here, being in town. I don't think these guys are looking for trouble. I just think they've had a hard time avoiding it. And to the extent that we can assist them to understanding what the obligations are and what we're expecting, then I think that's helpful. I don't think it necessarily needs to be adversarial. We just want to make sure that everybody's on the same page. So.
Thank you. Ms. Roy?
I guess I would just want to say that when it comes to issuing the license with conditions, I would not be in favor of that, because I think that would put Reunion in an unfair position, whether it's conditions that they have an extra set of rules to play by, or conditions that we hope to apply to everybody in the future, but we're going to apply to them first. I don't think that would be necessarily very fair to Reunion. So I'm not in favor of conditioning the license at this time. But we were shown an overwhelming amount of documentation from the Board of Health that I think just issuing the license would also be inappropriate at this time. So I'm not really sure with how many other options we're really left with besides just denying it at this time, asking them to please come back, and we'll approve it when there's no longer COVID restrictions on the music license. And to me, that's at best a mild inconvenience. It doesn't impact them negatively at all. So as Mr. Briggs just said, it wasn't like they had a banner year because of the music. It didn't generate any income from them, but it's still at least us doing something in response to the overwhelming amount of COVID compliance issues that they had.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Mr. Alton?
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to address your comments to me, Pete, Mr. Chair. We would be applying the rules fairly across all of the businesses were we to put a condition in to ask Mr. Briggs to step down from the Board of Health. We don't have any other Board of Health members in any of the other businesses. We don't have any other enforcement issues that have been noted that we need to really address. So it's not like we would be unfairly penalizing them. To me, that was the one thing that I saw that really stuck out. That was a problem that needed to be addressed. That wasn't already being addressed already by the Board of Health and the Health Alliance and the State Board of Health. So we've had Mr. Briggs on the Board of Health for a couple of years. The last time we had an opening on the Board of Health, we had 3 candidates, I believe, that were all very well qualified. So it's not like we don't have people that want to serve on that board. So I guess I just want to repitch that idea and get people's specific feedback on it.
Anyone want to go first? Mr. Prisby.
Yeah, Matt, I know where you're coming from on that. My problem with it is a legal one. I feel like there is a process through which, if we have an issue with a Board of Health member, that the Board of Health member can be removed. I think if we condition acceptance of a license on that person stepping down, we might end up with a legal challenge on equal protection grounds, where ostensibly a right might be denied somebody because we're trying to work something out. I hear you loud and clear. I would encourage Mr. Briggs to either step down or not. I think his term is up on the 30th of June. And hopefully that situation resolves itself. But I think at this point, probably the best thing to do would just be to make that encouragement and try to avoid entangling ourselves further in this, and just have the restrictions how we want to make the restrictions as to live entertainment.
Fair enough. I guess I'd want to be very clear with the Board of Health too, though, that if they feel like they are running into trouble enforcing health violations at restaurants because of conflicts of interest, they need to escalate that, because ultimately we are the appointing authority. And they should feel free to, come to us for the support that they need to be able to carry out their enforcement.
All right, any other questions or concerns, comments? Okay, so we'll have an opportunity tonight. I will make a comment, Mr. Hoffman, that we do have a section within our town charter with regards to removals and suspension under section 7.8, which I would agree with Mr. Prisby's assessment there that I believe that would be problematic. So I just wanted to state that there is a process there defined on how appointing authorities can do this. But more importantly, I think tonight we're here with Reunion Tap and Table with a license renewal in front of us. They've had their hearing. We've discussed our concerns. At this point, I think we've got a few options in front of the board. So what does the board wish to do tonight? Approve the license with conditions, postpone to a future date, or deny the license? Mr. Terenzini.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I just would like to bring to the board's attention again that if the license is denied, you are obliged to specify the reasons for that denial. And therefore, if it's your intent to deny, I would respectfully suggest that the board task someone with drafting the letter with those reasons, which could be brought back on 19 January for formal action of denial with that letter stating the reasons that were relied upon.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments or direction the board would like to go tonight? Mr. Prisby.
Yeah, I guess I'd just like to do this with restrictions. I think it's the route that communicates what we're looking for, what the community is looking for, to the business, and allows the business to go and do what they need to do. Effectively, it would be, I think, the same thing as denying it and have them coming back later, except that there's a lack of flexibility there. And I don't think it burdens them at all any more than they already are. It's just, they're bound to abide by the COVID protocols like everybody else, but it just allows us to communicate that, we see the situation happening. We weren't particularly happy about it. And it is something that we're going to be looking at going forward if in the unlikely, I hope, event that we're having this conversation again in April, May, or June. And I really hope we don't. So I think that serves our purpose. I think it serves Reunion's purpose. I think it serves the greater community's purpose. And it also happens to be the most straightforward way to go.
Mr. Prisby, with that in mind, do you have a motion or language that you would want to see in the condition or something that you want us to consider tonight?
Yeah, I move that we approve the license with the added condition that Reunion Tap and Table is to abide by all of state and local COVID protocols, guidelines, and regulations.
I'll second that.
So this is a motion to approve the renewal with the condition that Tap and Table 198 LLC DBA Reunion Tap and Table abide by all local and state COVID restrictions. Did I get that right?
That's it.
All right. I have a motion made and second on that. Is there any discussion on that? So I just have one comment that I'll make, and I see where, Mr. Prisby, where you're going with this. Personally, I feel that the way that this license is issued, that provision is already there, and I think it can be argued that we didn't need the condition. But I do feel that, given the circumstances, this renews the license. This, opens up the avenue for a business in Grafton who, is, that means to want to renew this or continue using this when weather becomes nicer. So I would be in favor of just the premise on that, although I'm not personally in favor of the condition. But I do understand why you're doing it. So I will be voting, in the affirmative when we take the vote. And I didn't know if anyone else had a comment that they would want to make before we take the final vote. Ms. Roy.
I guess I just agree with Peter saying that it seems like it's just repetitive, that it's not an actual additional condition, that was already assumed into the license. So I'm not really sure what, if anything, we're doing besides just approving the license.
Well, I think we're communicating that the problem that we're having here is continued COVID violations. And also that the next time this happens, we'll be back in here. I don't want to hear later on that, well, it's not really a legal violation or no, it's not really your purview. You're not the Board of Health. Nope. Part of this is communicating it with people. I think there are people that don't quite get it. I think there are people that don't quite understand what our role is. And frankly, I don't think we understood what our role is for the past 6 months. We could have been doing this 6 months ago. We chose not to. So now here we are. And I think, trying to do the right thing by a business, and I think trying to do the right thing by the community. The only other thing we're left to do is say, okay, we're not touching the license at all, which seems wholly inappropriate to me given the past behavior, or we're going to deny it and effectively be in the same place we are now with potential legal action on our hands. So I don't know if anybody wants to go in another direction, I'm game, but this is what we got.
Any other questions or comments, Ms. Roy?
I guess if it's about communication, we're not going to take into consideration the 120 plus emails we saw of communication that was given to Reunion from the Alliance, from the Board of Health, from the state. I think communication was done and then some. I'm just not understanding how this is any further communication. I guess I just don't get it. I don't want to appear not business friendly. That's why, in my estimation, having them come back is a mild inconvenience, but conditioning the license so now they have a separate license than everybody else, how does that not open us up for any legal action? I don't know either.
Well, so you can do that. I mean, that happens in communities a lot. There are different businesses that are differently situated, either by geography or the type of business or how they operate. This particular one operates in, I guess what I would describe as a strip mall, where they've got a limited amount of space for a tent and seem to have trouble fitting all the musicians they want to have in there with all the patrons they want to have in there. And for whatever reason, they've had to go back and forth with the state about whether or not they're compliant. They claimed that they were. The state said that they were not. There was a cease and desist letter issued, but now the cease and desist letter has been lifted. So again, it's, you know, it might seem unfulfilling from our perspective, but this is sort of what we got. And unless we're going to say no, come back in April, which just strikes me as a little bit too harsh of a remedy. But, you know, Colleen, you make a good point about the letters and the emails. Then, you know, this is sort of where we are.
Any other questions or comments on the motion? 1 second, Mr. Briggs, just want to make sure the board's had its opportunity. Okay, Mr. Briggs, thank you.
So I don't disagree with the language. I agree it seems redundant that it's already in there, but we are looking to follow the mandate with better communication in the future. I'm just honestly, am I getting 189 emails from the state sent to me right now? Is that what is in the communication packet that I haven't received yet? 189 emails between my business and the state.
You asked for a lot, Sean.
I've seen one warning and one cease and desist. So I just want to know that if there's really 180 emails or whatever, I can't wait to read them. But we agree with the language. I mean, I agree it's already built in, but and we can't use it till April anyways, probably. So
Yeah, your FOIA request was between Board of Health, Alliance, select board members to each other, you know, so it was the entire spider web of communications.
Understood. Got it. But it wasn't 189 communications to us about violations. Okay, just wanted to clarify that. All right.
It's basically a lot of trees that are going to get killed, Sean, to produce them. Okay.
No, but to be clear, I mean, the number indicates that this, you know, I've got, if somebody asks to produce, you know, that request for any other business in town, I can't imagine it would be as much. You know, what we read through was evidence of the staff at our Board of Health being taxed by the situation. People on the Board of Health and the Worcester Health Alliance being confused and frustrated and angry about the position that they were being put in. And then members of the select board saying, now what the heck is going on? So it was a lot. I mean, this wasn't a situation that I think anybody should laugh off and say, oh, well, you know, it was nothing. This was, from what I gather from staff, something that took up a lot of their time. And that is reflective of a concern that people in this community who are dedicated to public health, they were concerned about this situation. And so what Colleen is saying is, given that concern, were we to write a letter denying it, we would include as exhibits the 100 something emails back and forth detailing the concern, the serious level concern that people on the Board of Health, people in the health department, and people in the Worcester Health Alliance had, as well as the general impression that some of the people on this board had last week when we said, well, are we any more certain right now, beyond Sean's good word, that we're not going to run into this problem again? And I don't think anybody could say yes. You know, if we go ahead and issue this license, we're taking a leap of faith in trusting you that you're going to take this seriously, as you said you are, and that we're not going to have this conversation again. Nobody here wants to deny you the opportunity to make as much money as you possibly can in this lifetime. God bless. Go ahead, work hard, go do that. But, you know, during this pandemic, we've got an obligation to, and that is to determine whether or not the safest route possible for the community, and the thing that makes the most sense, is to hand you back the same thing that you got in trouble for just a couple months ago. So, frankly, as we're talking about it, I'm still wrestling with it.
Okay. Any other further discussion on the motion at hand? All right, seeing none, I'll take a roll call vote, please. Mr. Hoffman,
Deny.
Mr. Prisby,
Frisbee, aye.
Ms. Roy,
Roy, nay.
Peter Carlson, aye. Mr. Hoffman, would you please reread your vote back into the record, please?
Often, aye.
Thank you. Okay, I declare the motion carried 3-1. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Briggs, for coming in. We appreciate it. Thank you for answering our questions. And we wish you the best. And please stay safe. Look forward to this fiasco to be over as soon as possible. So
Thank you. And like I said, communicate. send the Board of Health down. Let's talk. I have no problem with it. We don't want to do anything wrong.
We will. Thank you, Mr. Briggs.
Thanks,
Have
guys.
a good night. All right, thank you, everybody. We don't have any resignations tonight. We do have appointment tonight, Finance Director, Town Accountant, Mr. Taranzini.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you know, about 2 months ago, we came to you with a proposal to revise the town accountant's position to be more of a finance director to lead that team and help us as we move forward for better coordinated financial management. That position was advertised. We've given you a memorandum. We had almost 30 applications, which were narrowed down by an interview team of Amy Perkins, Mary Oliver, our assessor, Anita Patel, the business manager in the school district, and our former town accountant, and a member of the finance committee who we asked to sit in on this. They narrowed it down to 3 folks that they gave to me in unranked order, and I did the final interviews. I'm pleased to present to you tonight Ms. Mary Laurie, who's currently the finance director for the town of Munson, basically which manages the same set of disciplines as we envision in the finance director here. She's done exceptionally well there, spoken well of, and we're really very pleased to be able to present her here tonight. We've negotiated a package. You have the draft contract, which I would hope you would include in the motion should you choose to move forward to confirm my nomination of Ms. Laura. She would join us on February 1, which will be excellent. I can't wait to get someone in that office to help us button up this budget. As you know, COVID and cannabis and some other things have kept my eye off the ball a little bit. So I'm really looking forward to your hoped for confirmation here tonight. She has joined us. Happy to have her address any questions you might have. I do believe it's an extremely reasonable package agreement that we've reached, given what folks are paid in comparable communities. She worked with us to keep it realistic for our resources, and be happy to answer any questions. And Ms. Laurie has joined us here tonight, should you wish to speak to her at all.
Good evening, Mary. Thank you for coming in tonight. It's a pleasure to meet you, and I just want to welcome you to Grafton.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, or?
Certainly. I started off in the state government. I worked for the military division, and I wanted to move up, and I went into municipal accounting, and I got a job in Munson as a town accountant, finance director, and I've been there the last 5 years. I oversee the accounting, the treasurer, assessing, and collecting departments.
Thank you. Does any board have any questions? Mr. Frisbee.
Yeah, hi, Mayor. Can you tell me a little bit about your experience in Monson over the past, 4 years, 5 years or so, how that department's grown, and your sort of your role in the budget process there?
Yes, when I first started, the culture, I've changed the culture in Munson. I have a team approach. I'm not a dictator. I don't pretend to know everything. And so my approach is, I'm a team player. I pull in everybody and we discuss it and we make the decision together. Because, learning this, you have to understand if one department does one thing, it's a domino effect. And if they do something, it will affect the collector a certain way. And so, I pull everybody in and we discuss what will happen. And then it's my position where I then pick the best course of action that will least impact each department. For budgeting, I primarily work on all of the budgets. I work with all the department heads. We have in Munson a budget platform called ClearGov. So that's all pushed out. Everybody logs on. They're all linked to their own department. They then submit it back. I do all the salaries, the debt, the indirect cost. I do all the budgeting for that, the healthcare. And I work with the department heads. I work on with the CIP plan, the capital assets and things like that, all within the budget.
In your role, did you work with the finance committee at all in Munson to determine either long-term projections or the current budget?
Yes, I do meet with them regularly. In budget season, we meet once a week. And then we also have a capital improvement committee. And so we meet a few times a year. And there is a board member on the finance committee on that committee as well.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Mr. Austin?
Yeah, just quickly, I'm guessing that in, your application process and interviewing and whatnot, you'd have a chance to do a little bit of research on Grafton and maybe take a little peek through our budget. Anything that kind of stuck out or any first impressions, challenges that you see in your first look?
No, I didn't see any challenges. The budget is definitely more. It's a little double than Munson, but that just means I'm working with bigger numbers. That's all.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Mr. Terenzini?
I just want to say that Ms. Laurie, as you know, we've lost our HR analyst, so we'll be looking forward to her joining us and developing assured backups. We've kind of kept that afloat with baling wire and some duct tape, and just depending on what you do with Ms. Laurie and depending upon what you do with the town accountant, I will warn you all to not speed through the town of Munson because they're going to miss her dearly.
All right. Thank you. Any other questions, comments from the board? All right. Thank you very much, Mary, for coming in. At this time, I can entertain a motion for the affirmation.
Thank you for having me.
I move the board vote to affirm the appointment of Mary K. Lauria as Finance Director / Town Accountant for the term of 3 years to commence on February 1st, 2021 and end on January 31st, 2024.
Second.
Motion made and seconded for the affirmation. Is there any comments to the motion? Mr. Terenzini?
I think that it's because the contract's in the package, it's understood that affirms the contract. But I would respectfully request that the motion perhaps be amended to include the execution of the enclosed contract by the town administrator.
Will you amend the motion, Ms. Roy? And then Mr. Frisbee, will you second that?
I amend to add everything Mr. Terenzini just said.
All right, so amendment to the motion to include execution of the contract by the town administrator. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those by roll call, please. Mr. Austin?
Austin, aye.
Mr. Frisbee?
Frisbee, aye.
Ms. Roy?
Roy, aye.
Peter Carlson, aye. Thank you very much. Declare motion carried. Welcome, Mary. Thank you very much for coming in. Look forward to seeing you.
Thank you so much. See you February 1st.
All right.
Okay, bye.
Thank the board for their support.
Thank you. Thank you all.
We don't have any appointments from the select board. We don't have any new business tonight. We have select board reports, T reports. Does any select board member want to give a report?
Mr. Chairman, if Mr. Blake's able to activate his camera, did you wish to introduce him to the board at this point?
Yeah, we can do that now. Yeah, we'll do TA reports right now, and then we'll go into select board reports. That works for me. So Blake, welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
You want to give a little bit about yourself? I know you were also a recent hire for Grafton. Do you want to give a quick description and just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I finished my second day in the office today. I started yesterday. I'm a recent graduate of the Suffolk University MPA program. I went through and got a dual master's in MPA and an MSPS at the same time. I've done internships at the state and municipal level here in Massachusetts, and I better say municipal government is where it's at. So I'm very happy to be here, and I'm very happy working for the town of Grafton.
Thank you for joining us tonight. Does anyone have any questions or comments or anything they want to bring up to William? Do you go by Bill or William?
William, please.
Right, thank you. Yeah, Mr. Austin.
Yeah, just Happy New Year. Welcome to Grafton. Really glad to have you on board.
Thank you very much. I've watched some of the past selectmen's meetings, and I've got to say I do miss the beard you used to have. But
Good research.
My wife didn't love it.
understandable.
Other questions or comments? All right. Well, welcome you to Grafton. We're thrilled to have you. We're fortunate. Looking forward to working with you. I know this has been your second day, and I know it's during COVID, but we appreciate your willingness to come on board. Yeah, if you don't have any other questions for us or Mr. Terenzini, we can move on and we can say, Mr. Blake, thank you for coming out tonight.
I'm happy to be here, and thank you for having me.
All right. Have a good night. Mr.
You as
Terenzini,
well.
you want to continue with any TA update?
Well, I think the only thing that I don't know if we were able to get the email out in time. We had a staff member at the municipal center mid-morning informed that they had contact with someone who had tested positive for COVID. And we had 3 employees in the Department of Public Works who had either contacts such that they had to have a test, or they're in quarantine awaiting their ability to take their test. So that was frankly quite a bit of our day, kind of chasing down exactly what was the date of contact, when can they take their tests, when is the first date they can come back, if they're asymptomatic, which ones can work remotely, which ones are simply out of work. So I'm not sure that we were able to get that email was prepared. I'm not sure that was blasted out to everybody. If it wasn't, you may not get that till the morning, but we certainly wanted you to be aware of that tonight. The other piece is that the legislation which required that we give sick leave to anyone who does become ill has expired. So Mark Terry and I are working through to try to sort out how to allow folks who've had some sort of exposure through no fault of their own. They've had good practices that we might let them use their sick leave. We'll have that for you probably in the next few days, because we certainly want to be humane. At the same time, we have a fiduciary responsibility to the citizens, and we don't want to provide any reason why someone would not maintain their awareness, thinking, well, I can just use my sick leave. So that piece of statute we're dealing with. And I think that's really, other than the weekly that we gave you last week, that's sort of the, frankly, what consumed most of our time today. We have made the first cut through the budget. I expect us to be all the way through that by Monday or Tuesday. And we'll prepare a table. I need to circle back to CIP. There's some things in the budget which may need to move to the CIP just to get us within operating budget ranges. So I'll need to circle back to Ms. Roy and her group probably by Monday. I think that's really the updates that I wanted you to be aware of.
All right. Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Terenzini? All right.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, if I might. We have patched together through the really leaping into the fray. A clerk who normally handles the zoning board of appeals is backing up the payroll clerk. I'm trying to do some of that. Some of that's gone back to accounting. So it's a bit of a patchwork because we didn't have a good solid backup plan for that. And that is something that when Mary's on board, we really have to have a better designed backstop for the payroll. If something catastrophic had happened to Ms. Chase and she stayed right through to the bitter end today, trying to get Katrina and the balance of us up to speed on everything she possibly could. But to have that all reliant upon one person is simply not a good situation. And that is something that we're absolutely going to have to develop an alternative approach to.
Sure. All right, thank you. Any questions, Mr. Terenzini? All right, do we have select board member reports? No. Well, I do have one. So tomorrow we'll be having our final interviews with the candidates for town administrator. And we talked about this last Tuesday. I know we had a discussion, but just a reminder that that will be tomorrow starting at 5 p.m. First interview to start at 5:15. All right, moving on to correspondence. The select board want to go over any correspondence that was submitted to us? There was a couple in here with regards to some land situations, which we're going to get into next if there's no questions on that. So next up here, discussion Conservation Commission presentation for 46 Adams Road. So this is on the agenda tonight. Is an idea that about what they want to forward to the town meeting in May to repurpose 46 Adams Road, which for those of you who don't know, it's that cinder block barn that was part of, I believe, the Hennessy property that the town took over after Chapter 61A. So they're looking for, potential monies to demolish it as part of the FY22 capital request. There's a presentation here, and I didn't know if the board had any questions on this or any comments. Ms. Roy.
Do you want to just share part of the presentation right now so everybody following along at home can see the building and get an idea of what the plan is?
Yes, I can do that. So this is capital request from Concom about repurposing 46 Adams Road. Here's the location along Adams Road. Right before you get to Valley View Drive, there's a parcel of land here that the town owns. It has, it attaches to the Hennessy Conservation Land behind here, all outlined in blue. Here's a picture of the barn. Looking for $55,000 for demolition, and that's just based on an estimate to the town. This is just outlining from, proposed where the existing trailheads are, the easement along 48 Adams Road. And what they're looking to do is remedy that by demolishing the building and providing more direct access to the land behind there that belongs to the town. And here's the proposed trailhead. As you can see where the arrow goes, in conjunction to where the structure sits. They're proposing that that be torn down. And request of the select board tonight. They're looking to, deed the town of Grafton, 46 Adams Road, under the care and control of the commission to ensure long-term access to open space and parking. Looking for a $500 placeholder and capital request for a new deed and recording, etc., and a placeholder currently on the spring town meeting warrant. So they couldn't be here tonight because they were in the middle of a meeting. Their meeting coincided with ours tonight. But if the board has any questions, this will be on video. They can come back and address them. Is there any comments or concerns from the board? This is discussion item tonight. No decision really to be made. Open it up. Ms. Roy.
I think I remember on their capital request that $500 they might already have from CPC funds, just so fun fact kind of a thing.
Any other questions or concerns? Okay. So if all things going forward, this will be presented potentially at the Maytown meeting, but I'm sure we can have more discussions as we start establishing the warrant. And they'll go through the process with Finance Committee with their due diligence and process. Okay. No further comments or questions on that. I had here tonight a discussion about the town administrator candidate final interview process for tomorrow. This is just an opportunity for us to just, ask questions about logistics, just about process tomorrow night. So I just left this on here if any of the board members have any questions. Say Bernie did a pretty good job last week covering all that. So like I said, I left this on here just in case there was any last minute discussion items or concerns moving forward for tomorrow. Okay. All right. So next up, we have meeting minutes for December 8th, 2020.
I move the board vote to approve the December 8th, 2020 meeting minutes as presented.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to approve the meeting minutes? I'll just make a comment. I want to thank Ms. Duncan for taking extensive record of those minutes. It was a long meeting. She captured quite a bit of dialogue, but I do want to thank her for her due diligence on presenting that for us tonight. Any other discussion on the motion to approve minutes? Seeing none, all those by roll call, please. Mr. Often,
Often aye.
Mr. Brisby,
Frisbee, aye.
Ms. Roy,
Roy, aye.
Peter Carlson, I declare the motion carried. All right, before we get to adjournment, last up, we have a couple of items here. Ongoing tasks here, library building project. There was a weekly report that was submitted last week that gave an update as to where they are with things. You can see the exteriors going up pretty rapidly now, and they're on the interior. But is there any questions on the library building project? All right. Upton Street RFP, as you can see, there's no new development on that, but is there any questions or concern by the board tonight? Okay. Next up, trash and recycling. We have the schedule for the workshop for January 12th, but before we get to that, it is on the agenda. Is there anything that anyone would want to include as a topic of discussion for the workshop that we can share tonight or discuss with the board before we get there? All right, next up on the fire chief transition, there really isn't any new development on the fire chief at this point. Does any of the board members have any questions, comments? Ms. Roy?
Where are we with the fire inspector position?
We had interviews of 2. The pay, I had gotten different information as to what that might be. I consulted with Chief Gauthier late last week. He sent me some research he had done. We are expecting, we did try to reach the candidate today. We'll try again tomorrow. We'll make that offer based upon the research that Chief Gauthier presented to me. Light a candle and cross fingers, and we'll hope that the gentleman accepts. That's really all I can say tonight.
Any other questions or comments on that? All right, next up, we do have online permitting. That'd be a workshop item coming in on the 12th. I know we have Mr. Berger coming in next week to just go over the status, where things are, and just have a discussion with the board with regards to that process and how it's progressing. Is there anything else that we need to add? Mr. Terenzini.
Just so the board knows, we'll have Mr. McGoldrick also, because moving some of the conservation and planning applications over time to the electronic platform is a key element of trying to free up some additional staff time to work on the other goals of the select board. So it'll be Mr. Berger and Mr. McGoldrick and possibly Ms. Cameron as well.
Any other questions or comments from the board on that, Mrs. Roy?
Not on that specifically, but when you asked about adding anything else, would we be wanting to add outdoor music permits and music license and all of the license conversations on here for updating by the springtime?
Yeah, I plan to put that on a February workshop as well, and bring in appropriate staff and or members of the community if appropriate. I know that's kind of a month, more than a month away, but that is definitely something that I'm going to work with Mr. Terenzini on and just get a realistic expectation of what needs to be addressed based on our common conversations, and how do we get that back to the board in a reasonable amount of time to make take into consideration or decision to move forward with whatever's proposed. But we could add that to the list for sure to remind us.
If we're going this detailed on the music license, does it make sense to look at all of our licenses to see if any of them are also outdated and proactively prevent any future problems? I mean, I don't know anything about a garage license, for example, to know, hey, that doesn't make sense to me. Where a music license, not having music on the weekend, that didn't add up to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. I guess, from the board's perspective, I think that just dealing with this live music was just a one-off in evaluating and looking at reviewing all of the licensures in Grafton. And I think that's a longer task. Mr. Terenzini?
I would have to agree with Mr. Chairman. I think that what you're going to find is you're going to end up doing some sort of one-off blanket amendment to all of the entertainment licenses for, let's say, April 1, as the ABCC did when it allowed all the restaurants to bring their liquor licenses outdoors. And then over the summer, look at all of the licenses in a long-term approach so that you can have those ready for the October renewal cycle. Because we do also have on the workshop next week, we sent you all that draft statement of policy with respect to more specific actions on your first across the finish line for the retail marijuana establishments. That's going to be on your workshop as well next week. So I think the Chairman's right. I think this is a two-step review of these licenses. The businesses for April 1, live music, and then all of the licenses for the fall renewal process.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on that? Okay. I don't have anything else. I just want to wish everyone a happy new year. We're into 2021 already, and thank you very much for everyone coming out. Thank you. Got through quite a bit tonight, so I can entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
Second.
All those by roll call, please. Mr. Often,
Often aye.
Mr. Frisbee,
Yeah.
Ms. Roy,
Roy, aye.
Peter Carlson, aye. We're adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great night.